In 1996, the United States Mint was operating at full force, producing billions of Lincoln 1-cent coins for circulation. The Lincoln cent, a design that had been in continuous use since 1909, remained a symbol of American heritage, its obverse bearing the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln sculpted by Victor David Brenner. By this point in history, the coin had transitioned from the earlier bronze composition to the copper-plated zinc introduced in 1982, a cost-saving measure that made each cent far less expensive to produce. Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were the key players in minting operations, with Denver, marked by the small d mint mark, responsible for a significant portion of the nation's pennies. It was in this bustling industrial process, with presses stamping hundreds of coins per minute, that an anomaly emerged, an error so subtle at first glance yet powerful enough to transform a humble cent into an object of fascination. The circumstances surrounding the minting of this piece were tied to the ever-present challenges of high-volume production. Dies wore down, misalignments occurred, and metal planchets sometimes entered the press with imperfections that went unnoticed in the blur of motion. Most errors were quickly caught and destroyed, but every so often, one would slip into circulation, unseen and unremarked, until it landed in the hands of someone who understood what they were looking at. The error in question was not something that could be spotted by the casual observer in passing change. It required attention, patience, and an understanding of how a cent should look under magnification. For one collector, it began with a habit. Every evening, he would sit at his kitchen table with a small magnifying glass and carefully inspect the day's coins. He had started this routine years earlier, not for profit, but for the quiet joy of discovery. Most nights yielded nothing more than worn coins or slight signs of circulation. But one evening in the late spring of 1996, a coppery glint from a coin he had pulled from a supermarket cashier's change jar caught his eye. There was something different, just enough to spark curiosity. At first, he couldn't name it. The date was crisp, the D mint mark sharp. Lincoln's bust seemed as familiar as always. But as he tilted the coin under the lamplight, his breath caught. The inscriptions, especially Liberty, and parts of the motto, "In God We Trust," seemed to possess a faint shadow, a doubling that wasn't the result of wear or damage. His magnifier revealed it clearly. There was indeed doubling, a classic indicator of a die error. The letters almost vibrated visually, as if the minting process had stamped them twice in perfect but slightly shifted alignment. He turned the coin over and noticed something else. On the reverse, certain areas of the Lincoln Memorial had a distorted look, with lines that didn't align perfectly. This was no ordinary cent. He knew it instantly. But excitement was quickly tempered by caution. Not every doubling was genuine. Some were caused by machine doubling, a common phenomenon that held little to no collector value. Determining which category this coin belonged to would take research, comparison, and expert eyes. He reached out to a fellow numismatist, mailing the coin with a note that asked for a second opinion. Days later, the phone call came, confirming his suspicions. It was indeed a legitimate double die from 1996, struck at the Denver Mint, a rare variety that had only recently been documented by the numismatic community. The collector sat in silence after hearing the confirmation, realizing that this was no small find. As the years passed, the coin story began to unfold within collector circles. At first, its value was modest, worth more than face value, certainly, but far from life-changing. A few dollars here, maybe 20 or 30 for coins in high grade. But something curious began to happen. As word of the variety spread, more collectors began seeking it out, yet very few examples surfaced. The small supply meant that prices started to climb, slowly at first, then with surprising momentum. By the mid-2000s, auction houses began listing certified specimens, and the bidding wars hinted at a growing recognition of its scarcity. The market for error coins can be unpredictable, subject to trends, the availability of new finds, and even shifts in the economy. This coin's trajectory defied those fluctuations, holding steady even during dips in the broader coin market. It became known as one of those if you see it, buy it pieces, the kind of variety that could vanish from listings for months, then reappear to a frenzy of interest. Collectors who had dismissed it as a niche find a decade earlier now regretted their hesitation. The physical characteristics that made it so special were rooted in the minting process itself. A double die occurs when the die that strikes the coin is improperly prepared during its creation. Instead of the design being transferred cleanly from the hub to the die in a single, perfect impression, A slight shift during the process causes design elements to be engraved twice. Every coin struck with that flawed die will carry the same doubling, making it both a manufacturing mishap and a repeatable marker of rarity. In the case of the 1996 D. Lincoln cent, the doubling was most visible in the inscriptions on the obverse, though trained eyes could also detect subtler signs on the reverse. Yet the twist in this coin's journey came not from its minting, but from the rediscovery of an unexpected connection. Years after its initial find, another collector came forward with an almost identical coin, but his was struck in Philadelphia, bearing no mint mark. At first, this was puzzling. Doubling is die-specific, so for a similar pattern to appear from a different mint suggested that multiple dies had been affected in the same production year, perhaps even from the same master hub. This revelation opened the door to new questions. Was the 1996 double die more widespread than believed, or was this a case of two separate but eerily similar errors occurring in parallel? The Denver specimen retained its own distinct features, enough for specialists to classify it as a unique variety. But the appearance of the Philadelphia counterpart ignited debate and research, adding another layer to the story. It also heightened interest as collectors began imagining the thrill of assembling a pair. Two coins from the same year, two mints, each bearing an unusual doubling. The rarity of doing so only added to the chase. The original collector, the man who had plucked the coin from everyday change without knowing its full significance, kept a specimen. Offers had come in over the years, some tempting, some outright staggering, but he always declined. It wasn't about the money, though the coin's value by now had reached heights he could never have predicted. It was about the journey, from the quiet evenings with a magnifying glass to the recognition among peers to the mystery of its Philadelphia twin. The coin had become part of his personal story, an emblem of patience, curiosity, and the strange ways that history and luck intertwine. Somewhere out there, in drawers, jars, or coin rolls, more examples may still hide. Each one would bear the same telltale signs, the same subtle doubling that transforms a routine cent into a numismatic prize. But finding them takes a certain kind of person, someone willing to look closely at the familiar and spot the extraordinary hidden within. In that way, the 1996 Lincoln double die is more than just an error. It is a reminder that even in the most common of objects, rarity can be waiting, unseen, until the right eyes find it. In 1995, the Lincoln cent was still one of the most common and widely used coins in the United States, bearing the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the image of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. The Denver Mint, marked by its D mint mark, produced hundreds of millions of these 1-cent coins that year, each a small copper-plated zinc piece destined for cash registers, change jars, and countless transactions across the nation. The production process was fast, precise, and heavily monitored. Yet even within such an efficient system, the possibility of an unnoticed error remained. In the midst of Denver's vast mintage, a handful of coins emerged carrying a subtle but significant flaw that would go unnoticed by the public for years. The mid-1990s marked a period of high-volume coinage in the United States. With demand for pennies still strong, the mint operated under tight schedules, replacing worn dies and ensuring that the designs were crisp and consistent. Each die bore the refined engraving of Lincoln's face and the intricate details of the memorial, paired with inscriptions like Liberty, In God We Trust, and the year of issue. But somewhere in the process, whether during the hubbing of a die, the placement of planchets, or the striking itself, something went slightly, almost invisibly, wrong. The resulting error was not the kind that would leap out at an untrained eye. It hid in the coin's fine details, waiting for someone to notice. That someone was a collector who had been through countless rolls of pennies over decades, driven by an unshakable curiosity about what might still be out there. On an otherwise ordinary afternoon, they were searching through bank-wrapped rolls, hoping to find wheat cents or perhaps an occasional off-center strike. Most of the coins that poured into their hands were unremarkable, their surfaces dull from years of circulation. Then in 1995, D penny slid into view. At first glance, it was just another mid-90s cent, its copper plating worn in places, its luster muted. But the collector's habit was to check each coin under magnification before moving on. And when they did, the difference revealed itself. The date, 1995, carried a faint but distinct doubling, as did parts of the word liberty. It wasn't the heavy, dramatic doubling seen in some famous varieties, but it was sharper than the common forms of machine doubling caused by loose dies during striking. The letters seemed to have a shadow, a second impression tucked just behind the first, and the mint mark itself had a slightly distorted appearance, as if it had been struck in a moment of microscopic misalignment. Flipping the coin over, the collector noticed another peculiarity. On the reverse, the columns of the Lincoln Memorial were slightly uneven in definition, as though part of the die had worn or shifted mid-strike. Their excitement was tempered with caution. Many supposed double dies turned out to be common mechanical errors with little value. They compared it to other 1995 D pennies in their collection, laying them side by side under the same light. The difference was undeniable. This was not an everyday strike. It carried the hallmarks of a true variety, or perhaps an unusual hybrid of errors. The collector knew that to confirm their suspicion, they would need more than their own eyes. They began discreetly sharing high-resolution images with other experienced numismatists. Some dismissed it at first, arguing that mechanical doubling was common on coins from this era. But others leaned in, noting the clarity of the secondary impressions and the specific way the doubling affected certain parts of the design. It did not appear across the whole coin, only in select areas, suggesting that it occurred during the die creation process rather than at the moment of striking. If so, it meant that every coin struck from that die would share the same flaw. And if the die had been used briefly, the number of surviving examples could be remarkably small. Like T first, the coin's value was speculative. The collector was offered a modest sum by a dealer who saw potential, but didn't want to gamble on an unlisted variety. Rather than sell, they held on to it, continuing their research and scouring more rolls for similar examples. Months passed before another surfaced, and when it did, the two coins matched almost perfectly in their flaws. Word began to spread quietly among error collectors, and the few who had examples were reluctant to part with them. That be why the following year, certified grading services began to acknowledge the error. Early sales were still in the low hundreds, but each transaction drew more attention. Online forums dedicated to coin hunting lit up with discussions about where these 1995 D errors were being found and how to spot them. Some hunters claimed to see traces of similar doubling in coins from other mints that year, but the Denver version had a unique combination of traits: the partial doubling in Liberty, the date distortion, and the subtle irregularity in the memorial's architecture on the reverse. As interest grew, so did the prices. Circulated examples began selling for several $100s, while uncirculated, high-grade pieces pushed into the four-figure range. The market fluctuated as new finds occasionally entered circulation, but the overall trend was upward. The coin had crossed the threshold from curiosity to recognized variety, and serious collectors wanted it. The physical characteristics remained the focus of fascination. On the obverse, the doubling was most visible in the B and E of Liberty and in the 9 of the date, where the extra lines gave the digits a slightly swollen look. The mint mark D showed an almost imperceptible notch, a sign that it may have been punched into the die in a slightly shifted position. On the reverse, the central columns of the memorial were softer on one side, a detail that could easily be mistaken for wear, but was consistent even on mint state examples. Together, these features made the coin an easy target for counterfeiters, something the community quickly learned to watch for. Then came a revelation that changed how the coin was viewed. A retired mint employee, contacted through a mutual acquaintance, confirmed that in 1995, one of the Denver dies had suffered a hubbing misalignment during preparation. The die had been briefly used before being pulled from production, and while the number of coins struck from it was never officially recorded, internal estimates suggested the run was small, possibly under 50,000 pieces. Considering how many of those would have been lost to circulation, wear, or destruction, the number of collectible specimens was likely far smaller. This confirmation solidified the coin's status and explained the clustering of early finds in certain regions close to Denver. The market reacted swiftly to this new information. Prices for top-grade examples doubled almost overnight, and auction houses began listing them alongside other notable modern varieties. Collectors who had once overlooked the 1995 D as a common penny were now searching their change for that faint doubling, hoping to uncover a piece of the story. For the original collector, the journey from quiet discovery to widespread recognition was a vindication of their patience and instincts. They still kept the first coin they found, not for its monetary value, which had climbed steadily, but for the memory of the moment it first caught their eye in an unassuming roll of cents. It was a reminder that even in an era of mass production and advanced minting technology, human error and mechanical imperfection could still leave their mark. Literally, in ways that would intrigue and reward those willing to look closely. The 1995 D. Lincoln cent era remains a testament to the idea that rarity is not always born of age or precious metal. Sometimes it comes from a brief moment in a production line, a fleeting flaw in a die, or the tiniest shift during hubbing. It hides in the details, invisible to most, until the right eyes see it and understand its significance. And for those who find it, the discovery is more than just a coin. It's a connection to a specific moment in minting history, a story struck in a copper and preserved for as long as people care to search for what others have overlooked. In the bustling final years of the Cold War, while America grappled with economic shifts, technological leaps, and a renewed surge of patriotic sentiment, something quietly remarkable emerged from the Denver Mint in 1985. It wasn't meant to be groundbreaking, just another batch of Lincoln cents, faithfully pressed to maintain a tradition that had existed since 1909. The obverse bore Abraham Lincoln's solemn profile, while the reverse showcased the famed Lincoln Memorial. Copper-plated zinc replaced the older bronze composition by then, a cost-saving pivot sparked in 1982. Nothing about this change was expected to shake collectors. Yet one coin from this otherwise routine issue would go on to puzzle, thrill, and confound experts. Among millions minted, a single penny deviated. And not dramatically at first glance. The coin bore the typical 1985 D inscription. The D mint mark, denoting Denver, sat quietly beneath the date. But under scrutiny, specifically under magnification, the contours told a different story. A collector named Raymond, a modest enthusiast from Michigan, stumbled across the anomaly during his weekly coin roll hunt. He wasn't searching for anything in particular, just enjoying the rhythm of sorting through copper and zinc. It was the slight doubling near the date that caught his eye, a subtle shift in the lines, a blurring of intention. He paused, tilted the coin, caught the light at an angle, and felt something spark deep inside his gut. Double dies weren't unheard of, but on a common 1985 D penny, it defied expectation that Raymond's hands trembled as he held it beneath his loupe. He'd seen minor die chips and plating blisters before, but this was more refined. The doubling extended into liberty. Though uneven, it spoke of mechanical misalignment in the die itself. And then there was the mint mark. At first, the D seemed normal, but a faint trace of an extra curve haunted its edge. Could it be a repunched mint mark, RPM, or perhaps something more obscure? A hybrid error where both a die variety and minting inconsistency overlapped. He posted the coin in an obscure online coin forum, attaching images and inviting feedback. The replies trickled in, cautious but intrigued. One user noted an uncanny similarity to a known RPM pattern from 1984, while another cited the possibility of die erosion causing ghost impressions. The journey to validate the coin wasn't swift. Raymond sent the penny to a third-tier grading service, expecting at best a MS-63 rating. But the graders paused, conferred, and made a surprising recommendation. This coin needed a second opinion. He forwarded it to PCGS. Weeks passed, and anticipation grew. When the envelope finally arrived, Raymond hesitated before opening it. Inside, the label read, 1985 D. Lincoln cent, RPM and light double die obverse, MS-65 red. It was official. Not only had the coin earned recognition, but it had done so with both errors confirmed, a rare dual misstrike. Collectors began speculating. Was this part of a small die run? Could other examples exist? But despite roll hunts and eBay searches, few surfaced. The rarity wasn't just in the error, it was in the overlap. Roosevelt dimes and Jefferson nickels had their fair share of double dies and RPMs, but Lincoln cents with dual errors were considerably scarcer, especially from amid ADS that intra-spiraled. Coin magazines published brief snippets. Auction watchers noted rising demand, and Raymond, previously unknown in numismatic circles, was suddenly fielding direct messages for veteran collectors and dealers. An offer came from a Texas buyer, $2,400. Raymond declined, not because the price wasn't tempting, but because he wasn't done uncovering its story. Every tiny quirk in that coin felt like a breadcrumb leading deeper. Why 1989 word had spread. The coin, now nicknamed Ghost D. Lincoln, inspired speculative articles. Some theorize the error stemmed from a late-stage die installation that reused an older, slightly damaged D-punch. Others attributed the doubling to a transitional moment at the mint where machines were recalibrated, but a few planchets slipped through prematurely. Whatever the source, the value had quietly crept upward. Raymond received another offer, $4,750, this time from a known auction house prepping a rare cents catalog. Still, he held firm. Collectors who normally ignored post-1982 cents began scanning for similar traits. A few low-grade examples emerged, but none matched Raymond's specimen. Graded MS-65, both errors authenticated, with strong red luster. It had become singular. Then in 1996, Raymond was contacted by a retired Denver Mint employee named Carl. Carl had stumbled across a newspaper article referencing the Ghost D and claimed to have insight. According to him, in late 1984 and early 1985, a batch of unused mint-marked punches had been temporarily stored in a mislabeled drawer. When machines resumed production after a winter maintenance break, a technician allegedly used one of these mixed punches, some of which bore faint pre-1982 curvature, resulting in RPM anomalies. The double die, Carl suspected, came from a rush job when pressure sensors misaligned during reinstallation of the hubbing equipment. No record officially confirmed the story, but the circumstantial evidence aligned eerily well. Raymond was stunned. This wasn't just a misstrike. It was a mechanical echo from minting chaos, a whisper from an overlooked drawer that had rippled into numismatic history. The value peaked in the early 2000s when a private collector offered $9,100 at auction. Raymond agreed, closing a chapter but opening a legend. Yet the twist came years later. During a symposium on post-1980 Lincoln cents, a researcher unveiled an X-ray scan of Raymond's original coin, revealing a third anomaly: tiny traces of an unexplained reverse plating blister invisible to the naked eye. Whether it impacted the coin's error profile remained debated, but one thing was clear: the Ghost D wasn't done haunting. And so, what started as routine coin hunting morphed into a saga. From the mints of Denver to the hands of an unsuspecting Michigan collector, the 1985 D. Lincoln cent error became more than a mistake. It became a mystery, still echoing through coin rolls across the country.